All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. So I would just like to welcome you all to today's session. It's a very exciting session that we have here. And my name is Felicia Fuller, and I am the Director of Operations here at GBRI. And we are very excited to be hosting this webinar in partnership with CHPS. So GBRI, as many of you may already know, is a USGBC education partner and AIA provider. Our mission is to make sustainability, health, and wellness available and affordable to everyone around the world. And with this mission in mind, we have introduced webinars with suggested pricing, where one would be able to access it for free if they are facing hardship or watching it to enhance their knowledge. With hundreds of sustainability courses surrounding the topics of energy, water, LEED, net zero, green schools, daylighting, health and wellness, just to name a few. Learning Hub at GBRI is your one-stop shop for all of your sustainability education needs. And in addition to this, we also offer LEED exam prep material, which is available for free through our scholarship. And if you are interested in learning more about that, you can go to the link here on the screen. And today's session has been approved for one HSW LU through AIA. And if you wish to use this course for GBCI CE credits, we will be providing the details needed to self-report those at the end of today's session. And we will also be sending out certificates of completion to those needing them within 24 hours of the session. And with that, I would now like to hand things over to Irene.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Irene Negaglione, and I am the president of Into Architecture in Dallas, Texas. I am also a CHPS board member, and I will be your moderator for today. Just to tell you a little bit about CHPS, CHPS aspires to make every school an ideal place to learn. We are a 501c3 founded in the late 90s and formally incorporated in 2002. We set the standard for the idea of a high-performance school, green and healthy. CHPS stands for a collaborative for high-performance schools. We are a collaborative because of how we were founded as a joint effort of the California utilities, state agencies, and stakeholders. We chose high performance instead of green because it's about much more than energy efficiency. Our work extends to all elements of school design, construction, and operations. We are a member-based organization with member firms, districts, and individuals across the United States and abroad. The majority of our revenue comes from member dues and project fees. We also seek grants and sponsorships and get a few direct donations every year. We maintain comprehensive criteria for new construction and major renovations and offer companion recognition programs. Next. These are the learning objectives as discussed prior by Felicia. So with that, I think we can go. So before I introduce today's speaker, I wanted to go over a little housekeeping. Please put questions that you may have during the session in the Q&A tab at the bottom. I will also look through the chat to see if I find any questions, but we're going to address all questions at the end of the session. So I'll try to keep up with them, and at the end of the session, we'll bring them all to our speaker. So our speaker today is Claire Latane. Claire is a professor of landscape architecture at Cal Poly Pomona. She has practiced landscape architecture since 2006. Claire draws from her backgrounds in communication and regenerative design to design and advocate for healthy and inclusive community and school environments. With that, I'm going to pass it on to Claire. Thank you.
Thank you, Irene. Thank you, Felicia. Good morning or good day, everyone. I'm coming from California, so it's morning for me.
Green now, yes. Claire.
Great. I've never seen that before. Okay. So thank you everyone for hanging in there with us. Today I'm going to share with you some lessons from School That Heal, designed with mental health in mind. 50 years of research shows that viewing and being in nature calms our breath, reduces our heart rates, reduces stress, reduces anxiety, and brings communities together. Roger Ulrich's 1984 hospital room study found that surgery patients in rooms with views to trees healed faster and asked for less pain medicine than patients with views of brick walls or of sky. Nature truly is healing, and it is especially healing for people experiencing trauma. Before 2020, a groundbreaking survey of 17,000 people found that 2/3 of those screened suffered from at least one adverse childhood experience, and around 20% had experienced 3 or more. Adverse childhood experiences follow us through our lifetimes and affect our quality of life and health. The symptoms are often invisible or misleading. Students might act out their fear with anger or hyperactivity, or by completely checking out. Education experts suggest treating all students with care, knowing that the likelihood is that they struggle from adversities. A 2016 Los Angeles Unified School District study found that of students screened, 50% had suffered from moderate to severe post-traumatic stress disorder, and 98% had experienced at least one traumatic event. These rates are likely similar in most school districts. In fact, a majority of today's public school students deal with layered crises of poverty and trauma, fear of school shootings or neighborhood violence, and a genuine concern for their planet, and for the systemic inequities that plague our systems, including education. Now add to these the short and probably long-term effects of pandemic. But we can develop school systems and spaces that support mental health and counseling programs, contribute to school curriculum, such as science and health standards, contribute and support restorative justice programs, and boost attendance and enrollment. We can design school environments that boost the immune system, improve academic outcomes, help heal trauma, reduce stress and anxiety, increase a sense of safety, and improve environmental health and climate resilience. We can design schools that heal. I've found 3 main principles of design strategies that support students' mental health and well-being. They are to create environments that nurture a sense of belonging, to provide nature-filled places, and to inspire awe, curiosity, or wonder through design. I'm going to share with you examples of each of these 3 main principles. Nurture a sense of belonging. Despite the fact that students and teachers have the most at stake from their school design, they are rarely involved in the design process. The simple act of asking them what they experience and need at school gives us important insights into how schools are used and perceived. It also helps students feel valued and heard, both of which are vital for nurturing a sense of community and belonging in children and adolescents. Our Cal Poly Pomona landscape architecture students have been partnering with local K-12 schools to engage students in community-led design. While the concept of including students is simple, students and communities, there is an art to practicing it. So we use Design as Democracy as one of our textbooks to immerse students in the best practices of community-led and nature-based design principles. 2 years ago, we partnered with Cleveland High School in Los Angeles. Cleveland High School students wanted a more sustainable, climate-resilient campus environment with a special focus on students' mental health and well-being. And I'm going to share with you a couple of the exercises that our students engaged them in. Our Master of Landscape Architecture students created a survey to collect students' emotional responses to different campus spaces, because only students know how their campus makes them feel and which places work and don't work. Our students then mapped the Cleveland student responses to show the emotional geography of each space. And this image shows a variety of the campus spaces and the types of responses that Cleveland students gave us. The important point here is that the same space, such as that upper right-hand image, which is the main quad, could make some students feel excited, happy, relaxed, while others answered that space made them feel depressed, stressed, upset. So it's important to really focus on providing a variety of different types of spaces because different students need different qualities. Our Cal Poly Pomona students also asked Cleveland High School students to send them images of places they'd like to have on their campus to do different activities, such as be alone or quiet. And these were the images that they sent to our students to showcase places where they'd like to be alone or quiet. These images they sent in response to places they'd like to spend time with friends, or do a group activity, or to learn outside. The students' images reflect the research findings. They are full of variety and nature and human-scaled spaces. Students know what they need and want, and we need to do a better job of asking and listening to them. Next, we need to create a welcoming entry and edges around our schools. This helps students and their families feel connected to their campus even before they start attending those schools. Which of these entrances feels more inviting to you? Open entries with clear front doors convey a sense of welcome and certainty to visitors, students, and the greater community. In a school that is already built, easy ideas could include new signs or paint on the sidewalk showing people where the entry is located, where to find administrative offices or the auditorium, and other wayfinding strategies. In schools that are due for a major renovation, we might think about letting the front of the building stand along the street and using living hedges or elegant fencing around the back of the school if you need to divide it from the community. We also need to honor students' lived experiences and histories. This could mean showcasing art or growing and serving foods that reflect students' cultures and traditions. This joint use community garden at Fremont High School invites community members in to work with students, harvest vegetables and fruits, and host community events like free farmers markets, garden workshops, and community meals. The high school has a wellness center too, one of 12 that the Los Angeles Unified School District has built to provide mental and physical health services for students and community members. Not all students learn best by reading or through lectures. This physics garden at Pomona College allows students to feel and experience the physical forces they're learning about. This allows students with learning differences to feel successful as students and allows teachers to see students in a new light as they learn in a variety of landscapes. Learning outside can change how teachers see students and how students see themselves. In her 2019 landscape architecture master's thesis, Cal Poly Pomona student Lisa Strong asked 19 teachers to participate in an outdoor learning intervention. She aimed to study how outdoor learning might change student learning outcomes, but also perceptions. The outdoor learning intervention involved teachers taking students outside for 30-minute sessions twice a week for 12 weeks. Before the study, she asked teachers whether they thought outdoor learning could engage students academically. Not surprisingly, 78% of teachers said yes, and 22% said sometimes. When asked about struggling students, only 50% of teachers said yes, and 50% said outdoor learning could sometimes engage students. But after the intervention, 100% of teachers said it was true that all students, including struggling students, could be engaged academically by learning outdoors. Maybe more importantly, 100% of teachers answered that struggling students gave up too quickly when faced with setbacks before the outdoor learning intervention. But afterwards, there was this dramatic shift in teachers perceiving struggling students as being able to learn. 60% of teachers answered that struggling students would bounce back when faced with setbacks, and 40% answered that students worked harder. This shift in perception lasted after the outdoor learning intervention ended. After returning to the classroom, 75% of teachers answered that struggling students bounced back when faced with setbacks. 12% answered they worked harder, and 13% answered they got overwhelmed. No teachers answered that struggling students gave up too quickly after teaching outdoors twice a week for just 12 weeks. Imagine that shift in teachers' perceptions on the students' understanding of their own ability to learn. We also need to think deeply about accessibility. Our codes and policies often focus too much on mobility without addressing the different needs of students who might have developmental, sensory integration, or invisible physical disabilities that would benefit from a variety of natural surfaces, textures, and social and play opportunities and challenges. And research shows that plastic and recycled rubber surfaces get too hot, dangerously hot, and don't meet the safety requirements for falls as they harden over time. Petroleum-based products also have dire consequences for our planet. For disabilities that limit mobility, occupational therapists and special education teachers emphasize the importance of getting all students into natural settings. We need to work with our local disabled communities to understand the creative and universal design opportunities that might present themselves. Again and again, students ask for quiet places where they can go to de-stress. And yet most schools have nowhere students can go. Small spaces like this, out away from activity, can provide respite as well as places to hold community circles where students and teachers can repair their relationships with each other, themselves, and with the world. Often students don't even have enough places to sit, let alone lie down or walk or rock or swing, and they deserve to be comfortable. Scarcity of seating or other resources creates competition and hierarchy. And especially now, as we begin to emerge from COVID-19, we need to provide plenty of seating. We could provide places where students can rest and recuperate, because research shows that rocking and swinging and even walking brings us back into our bodies and restores a sense of calm. Hammock groves like this one are popping up all over in parks and college campuses, especially around the US. Why not in schools? This explains why people of all ages find comfort in swinging, from the smallest children to the oldest grandparents, like in this photo of a park in Cincinnati, Ohio, where all ages enjoy the bench swings. The second principle I'm going to talk about is providing nature-filled environments. We can design with nature to bring back or reveal natural processes. This was the site of a hidden series of seeps and springs 5 years ago when it was covered by introduced plants. The science department, which had a couple of faculty members who remembered what this site had looked like 30 years ago, raised donations to unearth the springs as a learning environment. This is that same location a couple of years ago. After the improvements, a new walkway brings students and staff and faculty along this series of natural seeps and springs. And the biology students actually manage and take care of this ecosystem. Student research assistants manage and revise the ecosystem, adding plants and studying the wildlife that comes to visit the daylight springs. It's really become also a favorite place on campus for administrators that work in the building adjacent to this property to go and unwind and reduce their stress. 10 years ago, Rodney Matsuoka's University of Michigan doctoral study correlated environmental attributes in Michigan high schools, 100 Michigan high schools, with student behavior and educational success. He found that larger classroom windows and higher levels of activity on the street alongside schools associated with less student crime and less disruptive behavior, while an open campus policy, such as letting community members use the schools after hours and on weekends, and natural features next to school buildings associated with more students planning to go to four-year colleges. This points the way to an opportunity to break down and interrupt or break up these large campus spaces that tend to be on a lot of schools. Because wide open views, even if they were of living grass, related to more student crime and fewer students planning to go to college. But despite decades of knowledge pointing to these impacts, good examples of schools and design practitioners actually acting on this research is still relatively rare. We could take spaces like this with this enormous area of asphalt and athletic courts, and then beyond that, a grass field that's also focused on athletics, and really start thinking about creating multi-benefit spaces where trees and gardens can break up those views and provide shade where students congregate and eat. This is really important as our communities are impacted by the heat island effect and as we continue to grapple with global warming. In terms of how much tree canopy we should aim for, which is a really common question we receive, research shows that 40 to 50% of tree canopy across a block is where you actually start seeing a reduction in heat island effect. So this campus, this high school campus with just showing proposed trees where students hang out and to try to break up space might start looking like that 40 to 50%. We need to focus on planting trees where students are spending time or might be able to spend time, but also placing them where students can see them from classroom and cafeteria windows, where administrators can see trees from offices, staff members, everyone on campus should have access to these green views to reduce stress, and especially for students, views of trees through large classroom windows is shown to reduce stress during and after tests and boosts academic performance. Of course, planting trees outside of windows is only effective if we work with teachers and administrators to uncover windows and forget the myth that all eyes and attention in the classroom must be on the teacher. Because research actually shows that students who are gazing out the window at trees or gardens or birds are doing what their bodies and minds are telling them they need to do to restore attention and so that they can be ready to learn. Another idea is to provide natural experiences for experiential learning. This elementary school in the United Kingdom simply planted 2 rows of trees to let students see what it felt like to take a walk through the woods. When we look, just turn our heads to the right from this walk in the woods, the rest of the school grounds appears really generous with this large grassy area, but it's actually marsh and unusable most of the year. It's pretty common for schools to be built in floodplains, in marshes, old stream beds, fault lines, and other less than desirable land, probably because it was affordable. The Campbell Elementary School Wetland Lab in Washington, D.C. took advantage of their soggy grounds to recreate a wetland habitat, which has become a favorite place for children to learn from and explore. This was an area on campus that used to flood after each rain and become a muddy mess. And now it's this beautiful learning and play opportunity. Children also need places where they can test their balance, their strength and agility. The International School Grounds Alliance, whose leadership represents 38 organizations from 16 countries and 6 continents, released a Risk in Play and Learning Declaration in 2017. Since the world is full of risks, they wrote, children need to learn to recognize and respond to them in order to protect themselves and to develop their risk assessment capabilities. Instead of designing school grounds to be as safe as possible, they ask that we design them instead to be as safe as necessary. Nature play gives students of all ages places where they can explore gradually, climbing, for instance, as high as their senses allow them to feel safe. Unique school design can also create a strong attachment to a place, such as this carved sandstone climbing wall, which children made themselves with the guidance of a local stone carver. The third principle is inspire awe by designing for wonder, beauty, and awe. Researchers at UC Berkeley for a project called Project Awe found that awe-inspiring experiences like sunsets, artworks, music, and grand nature improve our mental health and bring us together. 75% of what people answered bring them that feeling of awe were natural phenomenon. But we can also use public art that speaks different narratives to each individual. And even discovering small creatures, which I'm sure all of you or many of you can remember as a child, the magic of finding a snail or a roly-poly. During moments of stress or anxiety, these special places and moments become anchors to hold on to and allows students to develop an attachment to place that improves mental health and a sense of community and belonging. And students whose curiosity is sparked, who are inspired or simply comfortable, are more likely to show up to school and to be ready to learn. So one of the biggest hurdles towards transforming school campuses is communication. We're trying to shift perceptions and priorities and practices that have been formed for over a century of industrialized school design, and we need to keep that in mind as we run up against roadblocks by making school transformation. Our language, whether we are teachers or designers or administrators or counselors, is full of code words. How are we supposed to transform school environments if we don't understand the person we're trying to convince, or if they don't understand us? So we need to really pay attention to the words we're using and to put ourselves in their shoes. If you are a designer trying to convince a school administrator about the benefits of nature-based, community-led design, then it's really our responsibility as a designer to understand what the administrator's concerns and goals are so that we can have a relevant and valuable conversation. This means that we have opportunities to listen deeply to students, to support parents by understanding their stresses and concerns. We need to educate designers, as all of you probably realize, not all designers understand the mental health and well-being benefits that we can achieve through design. We need to teach educators how to teach outside, because that's not part of the teaching curriculum. And they need support in being able to do that. We need to empathize with administrators. And we have opportunities as well to partner with government agencies, because as we know, school districts are generally underfunded and they need help and resources in order to make large-scale transformations. The other hurdle that we always bump into is how to pay for these improvements in both the short and long term. And some strategies that might support or fund continued maintenance, which is often the biggest hurdle when it comes to living systems of new spaces or programs, even might include connecting school transformations to attendance and enrollment, which is often connected to school funding budgets, at least in the United States. We can really focus on putting capital investments towards multi-benefit design strategies that support mental health, physical health, education and curriculum, and community benefits, because focusing on those and talking about those benefits might open funding streams that you didn't think about before. We have professional development opportunities to train teachers to teach outside and to train land management teams. Sometimes the hurdle is simply on how are we going to take care of living systems. So providing professional development to school management, land management teams can be a way to take care of that. And often we can reduce maintenance, the amount of time and energy and resources that go into maintaining landscapes, but we have to teach people how to take care of those. And then another strategy is to meet city, county, or state or national goals for stormwater management or energy efficiency or climate resilience, both because that might open up funding through grants, or because local or regional state agencies might help fund and implement changes to meet their own goals. Schools are spread out throughout communities and can be a really important place to start with some of those multi-benefit solutions. This is a diagram of an idea of linking finance streams that was created by the Nature Conservancy and the Trust for Public Land. And the idea is that if we think about urban tree canopy, for instance, for all its benefits that research shows tree canopy, increased tree canopy can have on reducing air pollution and improving health. Inviting people to be outside and walk and get more exercise, reducing the heat island effect and reducing heat exhaustion, heat stroke, cleaning the air and reducing asthma and cardiovascular disease. If we can really tie those benefits to health outcomes and the mission of health organizations, we might convince them to spend funding, to donate funding, or put health funding towards building up that urban tree canopy to reduce the need to treat people downstream. So that's one example of how we might tap into other types of funding in order to pay for school improvements. I'm going to introduce you to a few schools that provide examples, but first I want to just check in on the questions because I can pick and choose what schools I highlight today. So
we have a few questions. So let me go for the first one. There was a question that was asked about, do you see these learnings ever being adopted by offices and other workplaces? And that question came up as you were showing the images of the hammocks and the swings.
Yeah, I mean, especially as we start coming back into, a lot of us have been working remotely for a couple of years and realizing that if we are going to go back to a work environment, maybe we need to prioritize a healthy work environment. And so I have seen actually a lot of the research on the transformation of employee satisfaction, for instance. A lot of this research is from studying workplaces where employees with views to windows have higher work satisfaction, higher job satisfaction, less turnover, they're less likely to leave. So absolutely, that's a great question.
Also, a question was raised, and I know you addressed it a little bit at the end, but sometimes districts complain about maintenance costs of adding trees, and you addressed it a little bit when you talked there about the money in the end. There's also a question, did the teachers who found better outcomes for students in outdoor settings increase the amount of their outdoor teaching after the study?
That's a really good question, and I don't believe the study covered that, but they didn't do a longitudinal study because this was a master student, so she had a year to conduct that study, but it would be a great follow-up study.
And there was also a comment that was made that schools have turned into more of a prison yard and feel over time because of the security concerns and problems. Sounds like a lot can be done to create nice outside places to help soften the security hardscape designs. So,
yeah, I can show you a school that did that really well.
And I know in your book you referred to Sarah Goldhagen's book and how she has linked those to being a pathway to prison. There's a question, are there statistics to support student stress reduction and raise in test scores with access to nature?
There are, of course, I'm not thinking of the statistics offhand, but actually a really interesting case study here in Los Angeles is Leo Politi Elementary School. And they partnered with the National Wildlife Federation, I believe, to put in a habitat garden on an underused piece of their school. And within 3 years, I'm not sure if it was, if there was a scientific study done on this, but within 3 years, their students' science scores had increased. I can't remember actually the exact, a lot. They had increased a lot. And I can share with you, maybe afterwards, send the link to the LA Times article, the Los Angeles Times article, if any of you do a Google search on Leo Politi Elementary School, Los Angeles Times, or I believe the title of that article is Just Attracting naturally, and it has the raise and test scores in there. It was really a phenomenal anecdotal story.
That's great. Also, Molly with the California Department of Education shared some reports on the chat, so people can look at that too.
Thank you so much.
There's also a question. It seems like there's a conflict, or maybe a perceived conflict, between strategies to create nature-filled and smaller, quiet outdoor spaces and concerns and strategies for supervision and safety. Can you suggest any strategies for having productive conversations to work through these issues?
That's such a good question. And this comes back to, we have all of these really long-term practices that are not based in research. So to try to change behavior and perception is really difficult. One of the things my research collaborator, Marcy Rainey, does when she works on a school, and I'm going to share with you all some of her research in a minute here with one of our local schools, is that she's a behavior health researcher. And when she works with a school, she always first asks teachers and yard supervisors to remove rules, because she has to observe how students will use a play yard, for instance, which is usually where the supervision comes in, on their own before we do a schoolyard transformation, and then she can observe the change in behavior. So starting by working with teachers and administrators to see how many rules can we reduce, how much freedom can we give our students first, just on the schoolyard as it is now. That usually ends up being a surprise for teachers and administrators, in that behavior issues go down when you relax rules. And there is a really great elementary school study from New Zealand that I cite in my book, and we can share that with you as well. Maybe Irene, you could make note of that, something
Yes.
I need to pass on.
Yes.
That showed dramatic improvement in student behavior when they eliminated all playground rules. So that's the first thing. The next thing is that when we think about blocking views, I mean, this is where so many students talk about school feeling like prison, because it's a wide open yard. Whenever you talk about planting trees or gardens, the first response is we have to be able to see across the whole yard. And the research doesn't show that that is helpful. It's the opposite. The wide open yards, the exposed yards, I mean, think about yourself as an adult. Would you want to be in a place like that where you're being watched constantly, surveilled constantly? No, that's why students feel like they're in a prison. And if you treat people a certain way, they're going to start acting that way. Rodney Matsuoka's study of 100 Michigan high schools in the most metropolitan neighborhoods to the most rural neighborhoods, he controlled for everything. That was a PhD dissertation, and he found it was the schools with more trees and more gardens that had reduced student crime and reduced disorderly conduct. He also found that every school, even the most green school with the most trees, could have had a dramatic improvement or increase in tree canopy, for instance. Like you all know, because you're on this call for CHPS, our schools, it's hard to find schools. We have never come across a threshold of like, here's the maximum amount of gardens and tree canopies you can have in a school before it stops giving more benefit, because there just aren't that many great examples unless you start looking at alternative education like forest school programs, for instance. And that's a whole nother conversation that I don't go into.
So since you just alluded to that, Rachel asked about, your information on the grassy lawn spaces, and she actually said that she would like to provide information on any reports or findings about it. And you just referred to that Michigan high school studies. So maybe we can gain access to that.
Rachel, I would agree that so a lot of schools don't have any grass. So adding grass is actually adding living grass is actually a really important improvement, because like Marcy Rainey's work shows that on an asphalt schoolyard, which a lot of our elementary schools are here, completely asphalt, if you add living grass, this gives students a place where they can run safely, especially if there's grass with trees around it. It gives students a place where they can engage in a lot more variety of behaviors than the asphalt, which is mostly for competitive sort of ball sports. The grass engages more students in cartwheels, tumbling, but even just being able to sit on the grass and then get back up again is a really important exercise and muscle strength to build as we get older. And that can help prevent injury down the line as we get older, developing those strength, those kinds of muscles. So grass is really important. And if you're talking about in Southern California drought, we're all about removing lawns because they're not climate appropriate. But if there is one place to have lawns, I would say it is schools. That said, we need to not just have the wide open grass, the wide open asphalt. There need to be broken up with trees and gardens and a variety of size of spaces for students and teachers to go to when they need different types of places, and when they need to get away from the stress. They really need to be able to go somewhere where it feels like they are away from, really getting away from whatever it is that they're stressed out about.
She also asked, so is that that a sort of like an intermediate intervention that is less desirable than gardens and trees? So is it, it's asphalt and grass then moving forward?
I think it's a step forward than just 100% asphalt. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, both climatically for the heat island effect, for rainwater capture, but I would try to go further.
Okay, we have one other question from Maria that says, any reference about the universal needs to attend?
Do you mean, Maria, are you referring to universal design principles, or can you elaborate a little bit on that question?
We'll see if we can get that answer. How about a comment was made, I think as a parent, the main concern is the safety, especially for younger kids. So how do we draw the line between very safe places and responsibly safe spaces? Sorry.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a really important strategy is to engage the disability community in that conversation, because often the monolithic or prefab play structures are a response to wanting to have a variety or an accessible play opportunity. So that's one way to do it. The other way is to look to the research, because the research does show that that children, if in a natural setting, like climbing a tree, for instance, how many of you were tree climbers growing up? I was. I'm terrified of heights now, but I loved being in the trees when I was young. And with tree climbing, there isn't this perception as a child that, oh, it's built for me, so I can do whatever I want on this because it's safe. And also for parents. With tree climbing, a child knows they're taking a risk. They can feel it because it's not a designed environment. They sort of test themselves over time, and according to the research. I had a climber. I have 3 children, and one of them I would not leave on his own because he was just the one that would like dart out into the middle of the street no matter where we were. So parents, this is a hard one. We have to like baby step towards how do you allow children to take more risks. And the general rule is that children know their limits. Of course, we all know children who don't seem to know their limits at all. So again, it's like we have to work with the whole community to find that balance. And there are people trained in safe play environments. I would, if you're a school district or a designer, I would look for those experts in safe play environments that have a focus on nature-based play, though, because as you know, there are designers that have different goals and different principles. So look for those experts that have the same principles that you're looking for, that you're really trying to expand variety and opportunity to play in nature and get the help there.
Okay, and Maria came back and answered. She said yes. You talked about considering diverse disabilities. Those, I believe, include neurodivergent approach. Since you reclaim for textures and sensorial perception, so it is referring to universal design. Okay.
Yeah, so I think that I'm trying to remember what I said, but the main thing is with universal design and multisensorial design, like my point was, like, we have this in the United States. I don't know the codes in other countries, but in the United States, our accessibility codes are really focused on mobility challenges. So with ramps and hard surfaces, or for people getting around in wheelchairs. And there isn't as much focus on those developmental and neurodivergent differences. So this is where community engagement comes in again, where we really need to work with our local student advocacy groups and the disability community, as well as our occupational therapists, special education teachers, because they can help us as designers and as school administrators understand what children need. But that also points to the need for a variety of spaces, because one type of space doesn't fit all. We need small enclosed spaces. A lot of students really need that sense. Most of us need that sense of enclosure, something at your back when you're feeling stressed. You need to be able to feel like you're protected in some way. Prospect and Refuge, Rachel and Stephen Kaplan did a lot of work that's worth looking at. And the quiet spaces, this is another reason to use natural materials instead of asphalt or plastic and hard surfaces, is it absorbs, they absorb noise and help muffle sound better, which loud noises is not just hard for students that might be struggling with sensory integration disorder, but also for students and teachers struggling with trauma. Trauma really heightens our like noise levels, visual chaos. It has a lot of similarities to issues with sensory integration. So I think hopefully that's answering your question. I feel like I'm going around in circles now.
Carol also asked, have you found landscaping solutions that are easier to maintain?
That's a great question. And I would say that looking towards the local ecosystems is really important here. What has been surviving in the area before irrigation systems came about, for instance, before the lawn was introduced. That's a really specific type of ecosystem. And here also, I just want to mention, this is also a really great reason to engage your local Indigenous communities to help understand and teach students how to design and install and manage a local ecosystem using traditional ecological knowledge. This is a really great way to honor and hire and compensate our Indigenous communities in school design.
The last question we have for now comes from Sean, and I know that you address COVID in your book. So do you have examples of schools adopting more outdoor learning and outdoor eating during the pandemic? It seems like this could provide some evidence toward reducing danger by going outdoors. Any comparison data on COVID-19 cases between schools that eat indoors versus outdoors?
I would love to put in the chat, maybe Irene or Felicia could look this up, the COVID-19 Outdoor Learning Initiative, which is hosted on greenschoolyards.org, is an entire library of case studies and recordings from school communities that have been practicing outdoor learning since COVID and because of COVID. So there's an entire resource library, free, online, of the research, the background research, tools in order to help schools take learning outside and eating outside, and then examples of schools that have done that because of COVID-19. I believe there are also some comparisons of schools that did and didn't and COVID rates, or there might just be like, you know, schools saying we didn't have any cases after we went outside or when we came back. I can't remember, but there is a ton of great information in there. And then I can also tell you, you could connect with the founders of the National COVID-19 Outdoor Learning Initiative, which are Green Schoolyards America, 10 Strands, and the Lawrence Hall of Science, and then a county school district, San Mateo County Office of Education. And they've started working on some research coming out of that. I'm not sure if that's one of the research questions, but it would be worth reaching out to them and asking.
Well, good. Felicia posted that resource on the chat. So those are the questions we have for now. So if you want to go into your case study schools.
Great. Okay. And these are, some of these questions will be answered in more detail here. The first school I want to introduce you to is Eagle Rock Elementary School, which is where I started this work. This is where my children went to school starting in 2005. It was built in the 1920s after the last pandemics, the Spanish flu and tuberculosis pandemics, which had a huge impact on the way schools were built in the 20s and really through the 40s and 50s even. You can see the large tilt-in windows. That was a design innovation in order to allow ventilation and lots of fresh air and sunlight without allowing breezes in that would rustle papers. I thought that was really interesting. The original design intention is still there. This is what it looks like now. And even though it went through an earthquake retrofit and it has stucco now over the brick, the windows and the classrooms are still designed the same, although sadly we have all of these window grates on first floor classrooms all over our school district. Inside the classroom, it's really interesting to note the placement of steam radiators under the windows. This was also a design innovation after the Spanish flu and tuberculosis pandemics. They were placed there and they were oversized so that the windows could be open all winter and but the radiators would heat the classrooms. You can see wood floors, wood trim, high ceilings, and these hip to ceiling windows allow lots of contact with natural materials inside the classroom and then views to nature outside the classroom. This classroom faces west and gets afternoon sun. So mature trees along the west side of that building provide views, but also cools the building from some of the hottest sun of the day and reduces energy needed for air conditioning, and also allows them to keep the windows open as it gets warmer into the spring and stays warm into the fall. This is what the play yard looked like when my kids started going to school here. And this was the first school my kids went to when we moved to Los Angeles. I had started raising them on the East Coast where there were grass and trees surrounding the play yard. So this was a shock to me. And it was a shock to my kids. The first day of school, we had seen the beautiful outside of the school, and I hadn't even thought about the play yard until we walked out here. In Southern California, they spend lunch outside under that shelter. They spend recess outside. They wait for school to start outside. They finish school outside. So they spend a lot of time on this schoolyard. And my children, this was 18 years ago, were devastated when they saw this playground because they were both used to grassy, tree-covered yards. So in 2009, I taught a landscape architecture studio at Cal Poly Pomona, and we used Eagle Rock Elementary School as our project site. Our students were learning about multi-purpose nature-based design strategies, and my son's second grade teacher invited our students to teach her students how to read and draw maps and talk about watershed health, which was part of their curriculum for that year. So our Cal Poly Pomona students asked the second and third graders to reimagine their schoolyards and taught them about looking at a plan view of a school. And 24 students drew what they wanted. These are two of those drawings. All of their drawings featured variety and places to discover and explore and living things and really little to no asphalt. And then our landscape architecture students translated those student drawings into nature-based design concepts to improve ecological and human health. And this is one example. At the end of the studio, they presented their ideas to teachers, the principal, the school principal, and a group of parents, who then went on to write a stormwater grant to the state. And they received $349,000 to remove asphalt and replace it with rain-absorbing, cooling, natural materials with multiple benefits. I want to introduce you to Dr. Marcella Rainey, who's on the very far right in that small image. She and her behavioral research students, observed the social and physical behavior of the students on the schoolyard before we did the final design. This is a drawing of the final design of the schoolyard. We replaced 21,000 square feet of asphalt with a native learning garden down there in the right. I don't know if you can see my mouse moving around. Tree rows to provide shade and break up the asphalt spaces, those large expanses of spaces. And the park area in the center with trees around one half is shaped that way to keep a handball wall and the basketball courts, which Marcy and her students found were the most popular areas to play. And then the grass is now where very few students were using. So we wanted to keep the areas that were working to engage students in activity and replace the areas that were not working. We also made sure to locate trees in front of classroom buildings that didn't have them, especially these These small buildings are little portable temporary classroom buildings, and they get really hot in the sun. So we made sure to plant trees in front of them. This is what the design looked like the week after it was installed. In addition to the lawn and the trees, the school district used this new asphalt coating to try to reduce the heat by changing the color of the asphalt. This is what the new learning garden looked like right after it was installed. We have a little hill all around the learning garden. It's just about 2 feet high to give a sense of being away and a sense of separation, and also to protect that space from the any basketballs that might be flying over from the basketball court that's right next to it. We also were really careful to place the log and stump seating in an arrangement that would invite students to run around and jump on it. This is what those trees start, even though you can see between the trees, starts becoming this sense of separation as they grow in, and which helps to reduce the scale of the schoolyard. And this is what it looked like a few years after installation. There are a couple boulders to sit on and jump off of, spread throughout. This is what the playground looked like before. This is a video of before, and in a minute you're going to hear Principal Stephanie Leach talk about what the improvements did. You can see where students are active. They're using the handball wall, but a lot of students are sitting still or standing still. Principal Leach will come on right now.
It's been fantastic. I mean, they're running, they're playing, they're tumbling. It's inviting a lot more creativity. There are all kinds of different surfaces to explore, logs to climb on, and stumps to jump off of. So it invites just sort of a different interaction with the environment than they get on your basic asphalt.
Marcy Rainey found in her research that after the improvements, students spent more time in small groups on the gray play areas, the green play areas, than on the asphalt play areas, which also associated with more positive social interactions. In fact, she found that antisocial behavior like bullying decreased by 40 to 50% after the transformation. The next school I'm going to share with you is Sandy Hook Elementary School, which was designed as a new school. In 2012, 20 children and 6 adults died at Sandy Hook Elementary School in one of the worst school shooting massacres in our nation's history. Afterward, the school district shuffled around the scheduled renovations to rebuild Sandy Hook Elementary first, because the surviving students, teachers, staff, and their families and the community needed a new space to help them heal and move forward. Architects Barry Svigals and his firm facilitated the design process with a focus on deeply engaging the community. They selected 50 community advisors to drive the design decisions. They included the security and safety team, parents, teachers, mental health professionals, public health experts, social workers, students, and the designers themselves. And so the group that they included really represented the interests of the whole community and fostered a holistic view of safety and wellness. In the years since the Sandy Hook school shooting, schools and districts around the country have hardened their perimeters, added automatic gates, security cameras, guards to watch the building and the buildings. And it's really poignant to see that Sandy Hook Elementary School took a completely different approach. The community wanted a school that symbolized an embrace. The advisory team wanted the school to be secure, but not at the cost of feeling safe. So they looked to the research, a lot of which I've just shared, on human behavior and feelings of safety. You can see the new design is welcoming and warm. It's made with wood and has gardens around it. It really connects the school community to the healing qualities of nature. This is the front of the school, and this biofiltration swale, which was just planted for this picture, acts as, it treats stormwater, but it also sort of acts as a natural moat around the school. And 3 bridges connect the parking lot to the school in these entries. And all of the administrators' offices that are in their offices most of the time are along the front of the school, so they can see people coming to and from the school. A central shared space opens 2 stories to the ceiling with stained glass panels that allows morning sunlight to stream through, and you can see the blocks of color that throws on the floor and the ceilings. Flocks of birds adorn the wall, lifting in flight toward the sky in this hopeful gesture. The architects sited the building close to the woods and the wetlands, which are off to the right in this image, that edge the school property to bring in views of trees to the classroom. And each classroom there are 3 classroom wings, and each classroom looks out onto a courtyard space like this one. And then at the end of each of those 3 classroom wings is a treehouse inspired space like this, a smaller space where students can go sit by themselves or be with a friend and really feel like they're in a treehouse. I'm going to share a middle school that is typical of so many schools that were built around our country in the 40s and 50s. This is Webster Middle School in Los Angeles, and it uses what is called the finger plan. These long rows of classrooms in 1-story buildings are connected by overhangs, walkways that have a shaded overhang. These were built during the 1950s to accommodate the baby boomer generation as they began going to school. This is what the walkway feels like. The designs were standardized to save design and material costs, and were also based on this progressive school principles of making school feel more home-like with a 1-story building and a more human-scaled approach to architecture. This is just an aerial view of that school, showing that after the school was built in the 50s, the 2 freeways came adjacent to it, which is, I'm pointing that out because freeway air pollution is really dangerous to schools. And if you're planning new schools, the recommendation is that you avoid anywhere between 1,500 feet or 5,000 feet away from freeways and major roadways. But for schools that are already there, one way to handle that is to really increase the tree canopy a lot. So anywhere you can plant trees between that school and the freeways can provide sort of an umbrella effect by catching the particulates as they come off the freeways. We focused on the courtyards between the classroom buildings. This is what one of them looked like before the improvements. You can see this is the north side that's in the shade, the north side of a classroom building. And every single one of those windows is covered with blinds and then security grates. This is a free resource if you just open the windows to view the trees. This is what the courtyard looked like after the improvements. It became a viewing garden and a stormwater demonstration garden. I also wanted to just share, this is an approach, this sort of design of the school came out of this indoor-outdoor learning idea in many mid-century schools. This was a school that I'm showing here designed by Richard Neutra in 1935. And I'm showing it after this because I think it would be relatively easy for you district administrators and architects to turn some of those 1950s finger plan school buildings into something that's more indoor outdoor in response to the pandemic. This is the edge of the field as it was before the improvements. There's a big sports field and there are neighbors to the right, and this part of that field would get flooded every time it rained and flood into the neighbors' yards. So they turned that into a biofiltration swale with opportunities for students to wander through and sit on rocks. They also added biofiltration planters, vegetated planters inside around the lunch area with walls around them to protect the planting from getting trampled, which is a concern on a lot of districts, schools, but also to provide ample seating for students between as they ate lunch or between classes. And this was also a really important example of community engagement and partnership. The Los Angeles Unified School District partnered with 2 local environmental organizations to teach students and teachers about environmental health and also to monitor the changes. We are going, since we're running out of time, I want to show you one more example of, so I'm going to zoom through some of the case studies that I share. Apologies if I get you dizzy. George Marshall is a great high school in Fairfax County, Virginia, is a great example of a major renovation project. I'm losing my voice. A couple examples of less expensive or free approaches to improving schools for mental health. The New York City Mental Health by Design program was initiated by the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. And they gave $10,000 to 10 high schools and partnered with them with a design team so that students could learn about mental health and create a poster exhibit to raise awareness with their peers about mental health issues. And then they each school got $10,000 to develop a space on campus that students designed to reduce stress. And so these are, I just wanted to share with you the examples that the students came up with. Meditation rooms, chill rooms, and gardens were what the students asked for. And then the last one I'm going to share is Redwood Park Academy in Portsmouth, England, is it's a special needs school for children and teenagers. This one is for teenagers with severe developmental disabilities. It's a public school, and they have a relatively new garden program that is managed by Ed Bond, a garden teacher. He was a science teacher, and now his sole position is to manage the gardens at all 4 of the schools in this cluster of schools that teaches special needs children with developmental disabilities. So this garden that they've developed is made completely with reclaimed or found materials and is planted, installed, and taken care of by the students. And he has I have some really great quotes from Ed and just anecdotes in the case study in Schools That Heal about the impacts of this kind of program on students' sense of themselves and the power and autonomy that they feel in taking care of the chickens and the plants. And they have programs like they grow all the flowers for their sister schools' proms, for instance. And they have one of the other schools has a kitchen that they make jellies and jams with the fruit that they grow and then sell them to fundraise. So that's a lovely program as well. And then just to come back to the three principles, there are three principal organizing principles and 12 specific design strategies. And if we apply these over a whole district or a city scale, we can really make a dent in improving public health, equity, and climate resilience, and give students hope for a better future by designing schools with mental health in mind. The physical feel and look of our schools and learning environments is overlooked in conversations of mental health and safety, and yet it is the one thing that we can transform to benefit every single student, teacher, and community member who walks onto campus every day from the day that campus is changed. And this is important because 60% of our adolescent mental health issues are undiagnosed. Transforming the way we treat our children and teenagers will transform the way they think of themselves and the way they interact with the people and neighborhoods around them. Restorative high school and school environments can invite and build a broad community around our students, improve the quality of the neighborhood, reduce anxiety and aggression, make students feel safer, more hopeful, and valued. This is the environment that our students deserve and that we need to provide to nurture the future stewards of our public realm and our planet. I'm going to share with you, I think you already received the webinar code to get a 30% discount. Feel free to share that with your networks as well. Thank you so much. And I'm happy to answer any further questions, although I know we're running out of time.
Yeah, we don't have any questions open right now. I did want to comment, there was a great conversation in the chat, and thank you everybody for the questions and for the links that were shared. Also, obviously, pick up the book because it's excellent. I love how you finish your book with a chapter in For the Love of Students, and where you address the opportunities that COVID-19 has presented for us to totally redesign. So with that, I think we're complete. Thank you, Claire, so much. And thank you, everybody. The presentation will be posted so everybody can have access to it, both at GBRI and at CHPS. Yeah.
Thank you all so much. You all have a wonderful day.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, everyone.